Hello, and welcome to Hip and the Diff for My Gif. Today we'll be reading Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, Chapter 21, The Tale of the Three Brothers. Harry turned to look at Ron and Hermione. Neither of them seemed to have understood what Xenophilius had said either. The Deathly Hallows? That's right, said Xenophilius. You haven't heard of them? I'm not surprised. Very, very few wizards believe. Witness that knuckle-headed young man at your brother's wedding, he nodded at Ron, who attacked me for sporting the symbol of a well-known dark wizard. Such ignorance. Nothing dark about the Hallows, at least not in that crude sense. One simply uses the symbol to reveal oneself to other believers, in the hope that they might help one with the quest. He stirred several lumps of sugar into his Gertie root infusion and drank some. I'm sorry, said Harry. I still don't really understand. To be polite, he took a sip from his cup too, and almost gagged. The stuff was quite disgusting, as though someone had just liquefied bogey-flavored every-flavored beans. Well, you see, believers seek the Deathly Hallows, said Xenophilius, smacking his lips in apparent appreciation of the Gertie root infusion. But what are the Deathly Hallows? Asked Hermione. Xenophilius set aside his empty teacup. I assume that you're all familiar with the Tale of the Three Brothers? Harry said no, but Ron and Hermione both said yes. Xenophilius nodded gravely. Well, well, Mr. Potter, the whole thing starts with the Tale of the Three Brothers. I have a copy somewhere. He glanced vaguely around the room at the piles of parchment and books, but Hermione said, I've got a copy, Mr. Lovegood. I've got it right here. And she pulled out the Tales of Beedle the Bard from the small, beaded bag. The original? Inquired Xenophilius sharply, and when she nodded, he said, Well then, why don't you read it out loud? Much the best way to make sure we all understand. All right, said Hermione nervously. She opened the book, and Harry saw the symbol that they were investigated, head at the top of the page as she gave a little cough and began to read. There were once three brothers who were traveling along a lonely, lonely, winding road at twilight. Midnight, our mom always told us, said Ron, who had stretched out arms behind his head to listen. Hermione shot him a look of annoyance. Sorry, I just think it's a bit spookier if it's midnight, said Ron. Yeah, because we really need a bit more fear in our lives, said Harry before he could stop himself. Xenophilius did not seem to be paying much attention, but he was staring out of the window at the sky. Go on, Hermione. In time, the three brothers reached a river too deep to wade through and too dangerous to swim across. However, these brothers were learned in the magical arts, and so they simply waved their wands and made a bridge appear across the treacherous water. They were halfway across it when they found their path blocked by a hooded figure. And Death spoke to them. Sorry, interjected Harry, but Death spoke to them? It's a fairy tale, Harry. Right, sorry, go on. And Death spoke to them. He was angry that he had been cheated out of 3 new victims, for travelers usually drowned in the river, but Death was cunning. He pretended to congratulate the 3 brothers upon their magic, and said that each had earned a prize for having been clever enough to evade him. So the oldest brother, who was a combative man, asked for a wand more powerful than any in existence, a wand that must always win duels for its owner, a wand worthy of a wizard who had conquered death. So Death crossed to an elder tree on the banks of the river, fashioned a wand from a branch that hung there, and gave it to the oldest brother. Then the second brother, who was an arrogant man, decided that he wanted to humiliate Death still further, and asked for the power to recall others from death. So Death picked up a stone from the river bank and gave it to the second brother, and told him that the stone would have the power to bring back the dead. And then Death asked the third and youngest brother what he would like. The youngest brother was the humblest and also the wisest of the three brothers, and he did not trust Death. So he asked for something that would enable him to go forth from that place without being followed by Death. And Death, most unwillingly, handed over his own cloak of invisibility. Death's got an invisibility cloak? Harry interrupted again. So he can sneak up on people, said Ron. Sometimes he gets bored at running at them, flapping his arms and shrieking, Sorry, Hermione. Then Death stood aside and allowed the 3 brothers to continue on their way. And they did go, talking with wonder of the adventure that they had, and admiring Death's gifts. In due course the brothers separated, each for his own destination. The first brother traveled on for a week or more, and reaching a distant village, sought after a fellow wizard with whom he had a quarrel. Naturally, with the Elder Wand as his weapon, he could not fail to win the duel that followed. Leaving his enemy dead upon the floor, the oldest brother proceeded to an inn, where he boasted loudly of the powerful wand he had snatched from Death himself, and of how it made him invincible. That very night, another wizard crept upon the older brother as he lay, wine-sodden, upon his bed. The thief took the wand and, for good measure, slit the oldest brother's throat. And so Death took the first brother for his own. Wink. Meanwhile, the second brother journeyed to his own home, where he lived alone. Here he took out the stone that had the power to recall the dead, and turned it thrice in his hand. To his amazement and his delight, the figure of the girl he had once hoped to marry before her untimely death appeared at once before him. Yet she was sad and cold, separated from him by a veil. Though she had returned to the mortal world, she did not truly belong there, and suffered. Finally, the second brother, driven mad with hopeless longing, killed himself so as to truly join her. And so Death took the second brother for his own. Wink, wink. But though Death searched for the third brother for many years, he was never able to find him. It was only when he had attained a great age that the youngest brother finally took off the invisibility cloak and gave it to his son. And then he greeted Death as an old friend, and went with him gladly, and, equals, they departed this life. Hermione closed the book. It was a moment or two before Xenophilius seemed to realize that she had stopped reading. Then he withdrew his gaze from the window and said, "Well, there you are." "Sorry?" said Hermione, sounding confused. "Those are the Deathly Hallows," said Xenophilius. He picked up a quill from a packed table at his elbow, and pulled a torn piece of parchment from between more books. "The Elder Wand," he said, and he drew a straight vertical line upon the parchment. "The Resurrection Stone," he said, and he added a circle on top of the line. "The Cloak of Invisibility," he finished, enclosing both the circle and the triangle, to make the symbol that had so intrigued Hermione. "Together," he said, "the Deathly Hallows." "But there's no mention of the words Deathly Hallows in the story," said Hermione. "Well, of course not," said Xenophilius, maddeningly smug. "That is a children's tale, told to amuse rather than to instruct. Those of us who understand these matters, however, recognize that the ancient story refers to three objects, or hallows, which, if united, will make the possessor master of death." There was a short silence, in which Xenophilius glanced out of the window. Already the sun was low in the sky. "Luna ought to have Plimpies soon," he said quietly. "When you say master of death," said Ron. "Master," said Xenophilius, waving an airy hand. "Conqueror, vanquisher, whichever term you prefer." "But then, do you mean," said Hermione slowly, and Harry could tell that she was trying to keep any trace of skepticism out of her voice, "that you believe these objects, these hallows, actually exist?" Xenophilius raised his eyebrows again. "Well, of course." "But," said Hermione, and Harry could hear her restraint starting to crack, "Mr. Lovegood, how can you possibly believe—" "Luna has told me all about you, young lady," said Xenophilius. "You are, I gather, not unintelligent, but painfully limited. Narrow, close-minded." "Perhaps you ought to try on the hat, Hermione," said Ron, nodding toward the ludicrous headdress. His voice shook, if not laughing. "Mr. Lovegood," Hermione began again, "we all know that there are such things as invisibility cloaks. They are rare, but they exist. But—" "Ah, but the third hallow is the true cloak of invisibility, Miss Granger. I mean to say, it is not a traveling cloak imbued with a disillusionment charm, or carrying a bedazzling hex, or else woven from demiguise hair, which will hide one initially but fade with the years until it turns opaque. We are talking about a cloak that really and truly renders the wearer completely invisible, and endures eternally, giving constant and impenetrable concealment, no matter what spells are cast at it. How many cloaks have you seen like that, Miss Granger?" Hermione opened her mouth to answer, then closed it again, looking more confused than ever. She, Harry, and Ron glanced at one another, and Harry knew that they were all thinking the same thing. It so happened that a cloak exactly like the one Xenophilius had described was in the room with them at that very moment. "Exactly," said Xenophilius, as if he had defeated them all in reasoned argument. None of you have ever seen such a thing. The possessor would be immeasurably rich, would he not? He glanced out of the window again. The sky was now tinged with the faintest trace of pink. "All right," said Hermione, disconcerted. "Say the cloak existed. What about the stone, Mr. Lovegood? The thing you call the resurrection stone?" "What of it?" "Well, how can that be real?" "Prove that it is not," said Xenophilius. Hermione looked outraged. I'm sorry, but that's completely ridiculous. How can I possibly prove it doesn't exist? Do you expect me to hold of all the pebbles in the world and test them? I mean, you could claim anything's real if the only basis for believing in it is that nobody's proved it doesn't exist." "Yes, you could," said Xenophilius. "I'm glad to see that you are opening your mind a little." "So the other one," said Harry quickly, before Hermione could retort, "do you think that exists too?" "Oh, well, in that case there's endless evidence," said Xenophilius. "The Elder Wand is a hallow that is most easily traced, because of the way in which it passes from hand to hand." "Which is what?" said Harry. "Which is that the possessor of the wand must capture it from its previous owner, if he is to be truly master of it," said Xenophilius. "Surely you have heard of the way the wand came to Egbert the Egregious, after his daughter of Emmerich the Evil? Of how Gaudelet died in his own cellar after his son, Hedeward, took the wand from him? Of the dreadful Loxias, who took the wand from Barnabas Deverell, whom he had killed? The bloody trail of the Elder Wand is splattered across the pages of wizarding history." Harry glanced at Hermione. She was frowning at Xenophilius, but she did not contradict him. "So where do you think the Elder Wand is now?" asked Ron. "Alas, who knows?" said Xenophilius, as he gazed out of the window. "Who knows where the Elder Wand lies hidden? The trail goes cold with Arcus and Livius. Who can say which of them really defeated Loxias, and which took the wand? And who could say who may have defeated them? History, alas, does not tell us." There was a pause. Finally, Hermione asked stiffly, "Mr. Lovegood, how does the Peverell family have anything to do with the Deathly Hallows?" Xenophilius looked taken aback, as something shifted in Harry's memory, but he could not locate it. Peverell, he had heard that name before. "But you have been misleading me, young woman," said Xenophilius, now sitting up in his chair and goggling at Hermione. "I thought you were new to the Hallows quest. Many of us questers believe that the Peverells have everything to do with the Hallows." "Who are the Peverells?" asked Ron. "That was the name on the grave with a mark on it in Godric's Hallow," said Hermione, still watching Xenophilius. "Ignotus Peverell." "Exactly," said Xenophilius, his forefinger raised pedantically. "The sign of the Deathly Hallows on Ignotus's grave is a conclusive proof." "Of what?" asked Ron. "Why, that the three brothers in the story were actually the three Peverell brothers, Antioch, Cadmus, and Ignotus. That they were the original owners of the Hallows." With another glance at the window, he got to his feet, picked up the tray, and headed for the spiral staircase. "You will stay for dinner," he called, as he vanished downstairs again. "Everybody always requests our recipe for freshwater plimpy soup." "Perhaps to show the poisoning department at St. Mungo's," said Ron under his breath. Harry waited until he could hear Xenophilius moving about in the kitchen downstairs before speaking. "What do you think?" he asked Hermione. "Oh, Harry," she said wearily. "It's a pile of utter rubbish. This can't be what the sign really means. This must just be his weird take on it. What a waste of time." "I suppose this is the man who—" "Oh, Ron's a cowboy now." "I suppose this is the man who brought us crumple-horned—" Oh God, I can't do this. "I suppose this is the man who brought us crumpled-horned Snorkax," said Ron. "You don't believe it either?" Harry asked him. "Nah, that story's just one of those things you tell kids to teach them lessons. Lessons, isn't it? Don't go looking for trouble, don't pick fights, don't go messing around with stuff that's best left alone. Just keep your head down, mind your own business, and you'll be okay." "Come to think of it," Ron added, "maybe that story is why other wands are supposed to be unlucky." "What are you talking about?"